The Kansas City Chiefs have won yet another close game. They've now won 15 straight one-possession games. So when the going gets tough, and it gets tough quite a bit for the Chiefs, they always seem to make it close. They always find a way to win. And this happened most recently on prime time in a game that would ultimately clinch the division for the Kansas City Chiefs. And at the end of it, they had their third kicker of the season in to kick a game-winning field goal. And he doinked it on the left upright, and it went in. So it really looks like the Chiefs right now, no matter how close the game is, no matter how they look throughout the first three quarters, they're going to somehow find a way to win. And they've done it once again. But the question becomes not necessarily are they going to win these regular season games, because it seems like they're always going to find a way. The question becomes how sustainable this is, and if the Chiefs should be concerned at all for these close games that they are having. Because in years past, they have always had really close games, even under this Mahomes dynasty. But this season, it seems it's been really more exemplified. There was, of course, the overtime game against Tampa Bay, where Tampa, a team that was really their primary focus is on their offense. That's their bread and butter. But their offense never got a chance to touch the field because the Chiefs went out and scored a touchdown. There was that field goal against the Raiders. And just so many more instances of the Chiefs winning these games where it really looked like they were poised to lose, but by some stroke of luck, they managed to come out the other end unscathed and got out to an 11-1 record, only losing to the Buffalo Bills, which in its own right is a very acceptable loss because that was one of the best teams in the entire NFL. I believe the Chiefs are maybe 12-1 now. Yeah, they're 12-1. They were 11-1 going into this game, and this was their chance to put the division away. And they did that against a very good Chargers team. Because ultimately what matters in the end, history remembers the victors. And the Chiefs are very often the victors. They have won many Super Bowls in recent years, consistently been a top team in the NFL for years on end. And these are having, this is with having, questionable regular seasons. Just a couple of years ago, they got off to a pretty bad start to the regular season. There were questions of if the Chiefs dynasty was ever going to, become a dynasty. I don't remember what the record was necessarily, but they were losing quite a few games to start off the year. And ultimately they turned it around and they won the Super Bowl that year. And they always seem to take it to another level when it comes to playoff time. And, you can kind of just ignore the regular season with the Chiefs. But this one has been closer than ever because not only has it been singular possession games, close games against teams that maybe have no right, being close games. We've all seen that in years past. It's just kind of the way that these wins have come about for the Chiefs because it always seems inevitable that they're going to find a way to win. And ultimately it becomes a case of how sustainable that is. Because if your guys are having to play at 100% all 4 quarters of the game, it can become easy to become fatigued. And your primary running back, Isaiah Pacheco, he comes in now. He's going to be a fresh, energizer for this team. But he did deal with an injury earlier on. So you don't want to work him too hard either. And that is my main question with this team is how they're going to be able to handle this fatigue. Because ultimately you would prefer to have these games done with. And then the guys can maybe, not play as hard the rest of the way through. But they're having to, play all the way to the end of the game. And on the other side in the NFC, there's teams that are having more dominant performances like the Lions and like the Eagles. Although the Eagles aren't a great example as of this past week for their real close game against Carolina. Before that, they were having some real dominant wins. And it can kind of remind you of Philly last year because they, to start off the year, had a lot of close games. They ended up being 10-1. But a lot of those games had some outcomes that could have very easily gone in the other direction. And then they had a end-of-season collapse, and that's really a once-in-a-generation kind of thing. Like, it was a really bad collapse for Philadelphia. But just kind of the idea of having all these close games, eventually it reaches perhaps a breaking point. And that's what happened for the Eagles last year, and you don't want to fall into that trap. Now, for the Kansas City Chiefs, I trust Andy Reid a lot more than I trust Nick Sirianni in their ability to handle this fatigue and get enough rest and mix that in with training and be ready. And everything we've seen from the Chiefs up to this point, in spite of the close games, in spite of the outcomes that could have very easily gone the other way, the Chiefs have gained some degree of leeway for the regular season performances. Like I mentioned earlier, back a couple of seasons ago, they would go on to win the Super Bowl after having a disappointing start to the year. They seem to always take it up a notch, but the real question right now, besides the sustainability of it, because at the end of the day, we have kind of seen the sustainability. The Chiefs are like no other in terms of their endurance. They're able to go on and have these close regular seasons and still look as good as ever in the playoffs. Beyond the sustainability, the AFC looks really good this year, especially with one team in mind, and that is the Buffalo Bills. They are the one team that has beat the Kansas City Chiefs this year. And that was a close game as well, interestingly enough, because the Chiefs might have a close game against the Raiders, and then they might go on and have a close one against the Bills, right? And those are two polar opposite teams in terms of success, but it's the same way for the Chiefs, and that's the real thing about it. And why it's not a problem until we truly see it in the playoffs, because they have these close games against high-level teams too. And we saw it in last year as well, where they would have close games in the regular season. They even lost to the Raiders on Christmas Day, but then they go on the playoffs, and the wins still aren't big balls or anything. Often they might be one possession, but it's good enough to win. And they go out and they win the Super Bowl with a rookie wide receiver as your number one. And at the end of the day, that is the main thing with the Chiefs. Despite the close games, what matters most is if you come out with the victory. And typically, you might not want to say that, just because it's not a good sign to have these close games. But the Chiefs, with all that they've done in recent years, being a dynasty, regardless of the questionable outcomes, and I'm an Eagles fan, trust me, I know, because this is another top team to watch, that you might be competing with in the Super Bowl, and the Eagles lost in the Super Bowl to the Chiefs a couple years ago. The Chiefs have gained leeway because no matter how close their regular season games are, they go out and they get it done in the playoffs. And so for that reason, I don't think that there is reason to concern if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, as much as maybe historical precedent for other teams might indicate. Until maybe you're a first round, second round exit, then maybe there's a little bit of reason to concern. But there shouldn't be a call for that right now. Not just because of their record, because once again, these games have been really questionable at times. But because of what we've seen in the playoffs from them previously, is that, you can kind of brush off a shaky regular season performance because they can have these close games, but they go out and they win them, and they can do it against top-tier teams as well. That's the big thing with the Chiefs, is if they can do it against these top-tier teams, and they lost to the Bills, but that's the only team that they've lost to. In this past primetime game, the Chargers are a very good team in their own right, and that's a division game, a game that a team is going to have circled on their calendar and really be prepared for. And the Chiefs went out and they won, regardless of the circumstances. So for the Chiefs, if you have a first-round exit, maybe even a second round, which it would probably be second round, really, as they're very likely to get the one seed now with that Bills loss. Ultimately, it doesn't matter until we see them go down in the playoffs. And if that's in the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl, I think that they would be fine with it. It's only in the second round that you would maybe have to have conversations about this not being sustainable, because really this has been the biggest example of the Chiefs having super close games. They're 15 straight games won by one possession. But in general, I don't think there's reason to concern yet. I don't think that we should jump the gun. As much as, of course, it can become easy to criticize the Chiefs. They're going to have every single thing that they do magnified, and rightfully so, perhaps, because we're in the middle of a dynasty. As unfortunate as that might be for parity in the league, they're going to have everything that they do under magnifying glass. But they've proved that they can get it done at the highest level, and when push comes to shove, they win these shaky games. And an ugly win is always better than a pretty loss, no matter how it comes about. If they can get it done in the playoffs once again, as they have shown year after year that they can do, there's really not a reason to worry for the Chiefs, regardless of these close games that they're having. Rashee Rice, he's entering his sophomore year. He's only going to get better. And the Chiefs won with him as their rookie wide receiver, as their top wide receiver, as their rookie last year. Isaiah Pacheco, he's getting back into the swing of things. I've got a bad feeling that Pacheco in these playoffs, he's going to, come in and get more carries than he has in this rehabilitation stage. And he's going to come in and just flip the dagger into one of these top AFC teams. And Travis Kelce had a rough start to the year. He's getting things back together. This Chiefs team, no matter how shaky the games are, no matter how questionable the outcomes, and the way that they come about, they have earned some level of leeway. And the only reason to be concerned for them is if they have a second-round playoff exit. So all eyes are going to be on Kansas City come playoff time. And you're winning these close games now, and you're just going to have to see if you can do it against the highest level of competition. Because there's a lot of solid teams in this AFC right now. The Ravens are a wild card team, for example. And Pittsburgh has had a surprise year, is being the reason for that. There's a lot of good teams in the AFC right now. But the Chiefs have shown the ability to win close games. The Bills are really the only team right now that looks like they have the power in the AFC, at least, to take down the Chiefs. It's just going to be a matter of winning these close games. And overall, that's what Kansas City has done, regardless of how the circumstances come about. When push comes to shove, they get it done. And there's really not a reason for concern until they show that they can't do that anymore.